folks, this is Meredith from the Papery Craftery, and today I'm going to be doing my second Halloween tutorial of this year, and this time we're going to be working in 3D and we're going to be making some quilled witches hats. First thing, let's do supplies. I'm going to be using gray for my hats with a little bit of white parchment colored paper for the band around the bottom. You can use your choice, either a slotted tool or a needle tool. But if you do have a battery operated quilling tool, that might come in handy here too. You're going to need some tweezers, definitely, and a brush is always handy. You're going to be using some glue, and if you do have a white colored pencil, I would grab that. We're going to use that at the end. You're going to need some small scissors, and a wax covered work board is always helpful for a place to put your quilling as it dries. I'm going to start by making the top of the witch's hat, and I'm going to be using 24-inch paper for this craft. The craft harbor paper comes in 24-inch strips, and I'm going to be using 4 of them to make the hat. FYI, these hats are pretty small. They only end up being about an inch or so high. If you want to make yours larger, adjust your paper as needed. If your paper comes in different size strips, again, adjust that as you will. First thing I'm going to do is glue these strips end to end, and you'll notice that I did tear off a little bit of both sides because you always have a nicer, quicker adhesion with your glue if you're using torn edges in quilling. So anytime I glue 2 things together or I am making a coil, I always work with torn edges. So again there, a tiny bit of glue on one piece, and then the next piece just gets sandwiched on top. I'm going to hold that for a second, and if it does get a little crooked, you can always tear it off and put it back on again with a little bit of extra glue if need be. And you're going to continue that till you have all 4 strips glued end to end to make one super long strip. After your long strip is made, you're going to want to roll it completely from end to end. It will work perfectly fine on a needle tool or a slotted tool if that's what you use. If you just get it started there and it gets too large, you can always take it off your tool and finish it by hand. Sometimes when I have something really big like this, I'll do half of it on my battery operated tool, and I will link above the video I made about why I use this tool sometimes and some tips on how to use it. But you can see there it's still not big enough for me to do the entire big long strip. So I do about half of it, take it off carefully with the help of a needle tool, and then I'm going to finish it with my hands. When you have your entire super long strip all made into one coil, you're going to make sure that you do glue the end so your shape stays. And after that, we're going to be able to start forming the peak of the hat. This is going to have to be done in a couple of stages because we're really going to be stretching this coil pretty far and getting that nice pointed shape. We're going to start by just pushing up slightly to make a dome, but we're really going to concentrate on the outermost edges of this hat. So you can see I'm kind of working it around in a circle, spreading out the coil, but again, mostly on that outside edge. You don't want to push these too far too quickly, because if you lose your coil and it pops out, like the middle pops out, you can't really fix that. You'd have to start back over again. So again, I'm only concentrating right now on the outside edge, and I get that as far as I want to, and then I apply a little bit of glue only on that bottom, maybe half, maybe even a third, just that part that I pushed out. We're not going to worry about the middle of this dome, nothing on the super inside, just where you can see where I put the glue. It's only on, again, maybe about a half or even just a third of this dome shape. So add some glue and brush that out, and that's going to help keep that part of the shape and set it. And then we're going to go back after that dries and keep pushing the middle even further. But I have found if you try to do it all at once, it's real easy to just go too far too fast, and you're going to have to start all over. And while that part of the top of the hat is drying, we're going to go ahead and work on the brim of this little witch's hat. And there's two different directions you can go when you're making this hat. You can start gluing strips end to end and just keep making a bigger and bigger coil the same way you started the other part of the hat. Or you can do what I'm going to do here and save yourself a little bit of paper. Not a lot, but a little bit. And what we're going to do is, instead of wrapping your paper around your needle tool, slider tool, even your electric tool, you're going to be using something wider. So right now you can see I'm using a Sharpie marker. If you had like a wooden dowel or something like that, you could use that too. But it's just going to save yourself a little bit of paper in the end. It is a little bit trickier to get this started because the paper has a tendency to kind of twirl around a little bit. There's nothing really holding it in place. So I added a tiny drop of glue to the end, kind of held it in place while I started wrapping it around. That's the tricky part. But once you get it going, it won't keep moving on you. And then you can just kind of keep it going. And once I take it off the tool, you'll see that there is going to be a big hole in the center because, again, we didn't start rolling the paper right onto itself like with a regular quilling tool. You can, again, if this kind of makes you wonder why we're even bothering, go ahead and just make it into one big tight coil. No problem. I just wanted to show a different way of doing things. So once you get to the end of that first strip, you can add a little bit of glue to the end and attach it so that this open circle stays in place. And then you can add another piece right where that one stopped off. And I pulled out 3 strips here. I actually am going to end up using about 7 for the entire brim. So I just kept adding strips and then holding it up to the base of my hat to see how it fit. And I found out about 7 was right for me. Once you have the brim of your witch's hat to the size that you like, you can go ahead and start shaping the rest of the top. I'm sure at that point your glue will be dry from the first part and you can form the rest of it. So what I'm going to do now is start concentrating on just pushing the top bit. So right in the middle there. So first I used my fingers, I got a little bit further. Then I needed something a little bit smaller. So I grabbed that marker again and pushed that in. And I'm just going back and forth really slowly. Sometimes twisting is a good way to do it because it'll just go a little bit at a time. I can use my tweezers. I found this is really helpful for that witch's hat. What you can do with the tweezers is you can just poke a little bit from the inside and you can really just focus on pushing one side of it. Just like I'm doing there, I'm focusing on just that side. And that is going to start helping it form sort of a bended shape. If you could picture, sometimes witches' hats are a little bit crumpled and sort of bent at the top. That's what we're going for there. So I use my tweezers to just push one side from the bottom, and then I can also very carefully go from the top and bend it just a little bit like that. So that is pretty much what we're looking for. And as always, with a 3D shape, you want to add glue to the inside and brush it out. And that will, as it dries, make sure your witch's hat stays exactly the way you want it. Next, you're going to attach the top of your hat to the brim, and you can do that very quickly by just applying a little bit of glue to the outer edge of the top of your hat and then placing it right on the brim where you would like it. never hurts to brush away any excess glue that you have. Always makes for a nicer finished product that way. And then I'm also going to add a little bit of a ribbon to my hat. And with this size hat, even the 1/8 inch quilling paper strips are a bit too wide. So I'm going to take some small scissors and carefully cut this little strip of, it's called white parchment. It's just an off-white colored paper. I'm going to cut it in half, essentially making a 1/16 inch quilling paper strip, which they do sell commercially, but sometimes I just make do with what I have. You can apply your ribbon detail just by adding a little bit of glue where the two pieces of quilling meet and then laying it on pretty carefully. It might move around a little bit. It's hard to kind of get it right up in there because these hats are so small. So if you need to grab another tool, something just to keep it in place, rub it on there a little bit and burnish it. That's always helpful. My tweezers did the trick for me, even though it still started moving. Sometimes it just takes a minute just to get it exactly the way that you want it. If you do have one of those white pencils I mentioned in the beginning, you can go ahead and use that now. I like to add a little bit of a squiggle down one side of the hat and also on the brim to give more of a highlight. It adds to the three-dimensional look and just makes this look a little bit more extra special. I have a few more hats to show. This one here is a dark gray, and I actually didn't use a marker, a dowel, or whatever to make the base on that one. I just made a really big coil, so I wanted to show that. And then black, of course, classic witch's hat color. Always a good choice. They're just fun to play with too. But if you're wondering how to actually use these little hats, this is what I did last year and made little tea-stained cards with the witch's hats as an extra decoration. They'd also be fun for a Halloween party, maybe some seating cards at a table. Something to think about. Don't forget, you can have a lot of fun with these witch's hats and make them their own. You could play with the size of them, use a lot of paper, make them large. You can really amp up the crooked top of them if you use your tweezers a little bit more. You can go really whimsical colors. You could do stripes. You can make them purple or green or whatever you think, but just something fun to do. And I hope you liked this one. As always, don't forget to like, subscribe, leave any comments you have down below. I always love to hear them, and I try my best to answer as soon as I can. And I will see you next time.